Welcome back to the wood shop, guys, and today we're working on a project. I know you're going to love this one. It's easy to build, doesn't take a lot of materials. You can batch a bunch of these out pretty quickly, and most importantly, you can make money with this project. So stick around. Now this particular project, I have sold an absolute ton of these. Usually I build them out of pine just because that's kind of what people want to pay for. But now once you start building these, and you sell them at craft shows, or you post them online for people to buy, which is kind of the way I get started. People just see these things and they want them. Now this particular one, the customer actually gave me some wood, so we're doing a different material. Today we're going to be using cherry, and you can do this out of just a couple 8-foot boards. I mean, if you're out buying this stuff, he had these cut into smaller sections, but just a couple boards will actually build one of these. And once we get to the end, you'll see how absolutely beautiful these are, and you're going to want to make these. And you, like I said, you can make a lot of money selling these things and building them. So now these are easy to customize too. You basically just set the dimensions to whatever particular size you're wanting to set these for. This particular one, the customer has requested a particular size, easy to change on the fly, very simple. Plans don't even really come into play on this one because it's so easy. This one, we're looking at a dimension of the inside part of it being 7.5 by 10 3/4 by 2 inch. Now, as I said, you can change that to suit your heart's content right there, whatever size you want to make these. First things first, I showed you in the last video, I usually go to the joiner and the planer, and I get a lot of questions, people asking me, what if they don't have these particular tools? And you don't have to. You can actually go to the place where you get your lumber, and some of that, if you're using pine, you can get it and it's already squared, it's smooth, so you don't have to do a lot to that. Now, we'll recommend, though, this is going to have a top and a bottom that's fairly wide. I would not recommend getting one wide board to make your top, because especially if you're using pine, over time that will cup. If you do get that larger piece, I would recommend cutting it into smaller strips, gluing them together, maybe alternating the grain patterns, that sort of thing, and kind of prevent a lot of that. That's why I said I don't really recommend buying wider ones, or if you do, cut them into smaller strips. Before I go to the joiner and the planer, I just measure this. It's a little too wide for my joiner, so I'm going to actually split this in the middle, because we're going to build this up in pieces anyway. Like I said, I try to cut these to smaller pieces. This one actually measures out a little over 7.5, so I'm going to do this pretty much dead center. We'll do 3 3/4, and we can glue those pieces up the way I prefer to do it anyway. Okay, so now I've got these jointed and planed. I've jointed one edge to make that good and flat. We'll set that side up against the table saw fence and make these square all the way around. I do have one or two here that's got some pretty good cracks, which is okay. I'm going to end up cutting that anyway. And right here, the dimensions aren't super specific. Generally, I like to try to maximize my material, as I mentioned before. So I'm going to take just the least amount off this edge as possible. So now this particular one, as I mentioned, I'm doing a miter joint. And when you do that, for what I'm doing, the inside needs to be your dimensions. So I was at 10 3/4 by 7.5 as far as the size of the rectangle. So you've got to measure inside your miter joints to get that measurement. And naturally, I'm going to go a little larger, so I'm going to do 11 by 8. And instead of 2 inch deep, I like to give a little bit of room. And so we'll probably just stick with what we've got here, which is just a little over 3 inches, and that'll look good. But let's go ahead and get our first pieces cut. And as I mentioned, we're going to cut out this crack. So we'll do that right now. And I will recommend anytime you're doing these miter joints, make sure you have a good sharp blade, because if you got a dull blade, it tends to want to pull that piece into the blade and that kind of stuff. And what it'll do, it'll kind of give you a cupped piece, and it's not going to be a good 45. And you can see how pretty smooth that is. There is a little bit of tear out. That'll clean up once we get everything together. And as I mentioned, you measure from the inside of the miter joint, not the outside. So this part right here, we're going to measure, and as I mentioned, we're going to go 11 inches to get it right here. You want to line your end mark up. You can do it with a tape measure, because as long as the two pieces are the same size, it's all that really matters. And then we're going to do 11 inches. And as I said, it don't particularly matter that much, but it gives us a good ballpark. And you can see I've flipped this over so that I don't have to move my miter saw. So I'll flip it up this way and cut it. And a little trick you can do right here, we're actually going to cut it that way. So if you take your other piece and basically just lay it on top to where you've got your miters at the same spot, you'll come down, get your miters lined up on the ends. Then you just take this one and mark that out. You've got your perfect angle where it needs to be. And then the way to check these once you've got them cut, just to make sure they're the same length, just lay them on top of one another, as you can see like here, and make sure your ends touch here and they're square and all that, and you've got two good boards, and then you can start on the other side. And a really easy way to put these together, this is going to be the sides of the box. Just put your pieces in basically the order they're going to go, which in this case, smaller one, larger one, smaller one, larger one. When we put this together, it's going to come together pretty much perfectly. We're going ahead and butt them right straight up to one another. Make sure your edges are where they need to be. Grab you some tape. Go right across the seam. And as I mentioned, this is actually very easy to batch out. So if you were doing, say you wanted to do 10 of these things, you could easily cut these parts out, lay them out one at a time, get them glued up, let them sit overnight, because I always do on any kind of glue joints. I let it sit overnight, and makes the process a whole lot quicker. So now we're at the point we can kind of flip this over. Hopefully our tape will kind of hang on to it. Okay. And it does look like I need to do a refill on an old glue bottle. Going to take a minute for it to come down to the bottom. There we go. And we'll do another little trick here in just a minute. And this joint for sure, don't starve this joint. You may want to make sure you got a good amount of glue in here. As I said, a miter joint is not the strongest joint in the world. So we're going to take all the help we can get. Now what we can do, now this part I would recommend trimming this up as much as you can. We'll get the old razor knife. And as much as possible, we're going to try to, maintain the, or prevent squeeze out. So we're going to get us a pretty good idea on our tape here. And don't put it over here to where it's going to get in your way. of your miter. But if you put it right here and that glue squeezes out, he'll squeeze out on this and you can pull the tape off. So for you, those of you who use this trick, you know how good it works. Those of you that have not, right here, you're going to see how good this comes together. As long as your tape holds. You can see the squeeze out I'm talking about. And that's pretty much a perfect box. Now I will say, at this point, I like to cheat just a little bit and use a pin nailer right here. Cheat just a little bit, use a pin nailer right here in this corner. These pin nails, if you've never used one, they're so tiny you barely can see them. And even if you do, you can always take some wood filler or a little bit of glue, and once you sand over that, you'll never see them. Wipe this glue off. And you can already see that's a very good tight fitting corner. Look even better once you sand it up. Now we'll take some corner clamps and clamp this up, and this thing will be good to go. Now before I put those corner clamps on there, you can see what the tape's done. It's actually prevented this tape from, or excuse me, the glue from getting against our wood here. We're going to go ahead and wipe off what we can. Doesn't have to be perfect. It'll come off when we pull this off, and we'll be sanding too, but you know, that's kind of helps prevent a lot of that. Having a lot of glue to sand off. Now, if you have to stain a project, you definitely want to try to eliminate as much glue as possible, because stain will not work on glue, and you will notice it, and it will cause you a lot of problems. Ask me how I know. So we get out as much as possible. Now we're not going to be staining this project because it is cherry, and cherry, in my opinion, is such a beautiful wood. We don't need stain or anything to try to make it look better. It already looks great. Now we will be adding a water-based poly on top of this, just because that is my favorite finish. I like the way it looks, and it's easy to work with. But other than that, that's got us for this. We'll add our corner clamps. I've got a small square here as well. We're going to make sure everything is staying where we need it to, and I can already tell we're a little bit out. Needs to come this way just a little. And of course these clamps are square themselves, but I like to double check myself, so we'll take a machinist square and double check everything. So these particular pieces are a little over 3.5 inches. So if you were to get 1x4s, that would work great. And if you stack 3 of these side by side, naturally, that's going to pretty much get us our width that we want. And then we'll just have to go with the length. And so 3 of these glued up will be plenty. And then I'll have a couple pieces left over. As I mentioned, I didn't know exactly how much we would need. But this should get us exactly what we want, and a nice cherry top and bottom. And then today we'll call that quits. Let this sit until tomorrow, and we'll pick back up there. So we're back on the project after letting it sit overnight and dry up. So we're going to go ahead and remove the clamps, remove the tape. Now the top and the bottom seems like no matter how you get them aligned, they're still, not perfect. So we'll run those through the planer. We're going to make sure the size is right. We'll set this on there and measure it out. And also we're going to cut splines in this, and that'll put us pretty close to getting what we need to do. We can mount the bottom to this piece because it actually attaches down here. But that's probably going to be another day on that one, because when I get the splines in, I got to let those glue, the glue dry and let them set, that kind of stuff. We'll go ahead and take these clamps off. I did run by the hardware store and got some hinges for it. Now I will say these aren't my ideal choice for the hinges, but I have yet to find any that I like online that are in bulk. So if you guys have any sources for that, just put a link to that, and or at least tell me where it's at. But I've not had a lot of luck with that. So it is apart now as far as the clamps go. Take this tape off. So it's at this point we've got everything took apart and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to have to size the top and the bottom. And I like to do that before I add my splines, just so that everything comes together easier. And this, like I said, I made it a little large, so we are going to have to cut this just a hair, just so we had extra room. We're going to space this evenly all the way around, cut off what we don't need, and then we'll come back once we're ready to do that. And I'll even chamfer the edges here, give it a nice clean look, and we'll add the splines in. So now, in my opinion, it's time to determine what's going to be the top, what's going to be the bottom. Naturally, you're going to want the top to be the best looking piece, with less defects, that kind of stuff. This one has, maybe a knot hole here and here, a couple little black flecks, a couple little chips. So this is going to be the very bottom. This is going to be, I guess is how you'd say, the top of the bottom. And then this one has the nicest face to it. A few little small defects right here. So this was going to be the very, very top. The one you're going to see the most. It's going to sandwich together like that. Hinges on it. It's going to open up, that kind of stuff. But for now, we're going to go ahead and chamfer these edges, give it a nice look. Okay, now you can do this a lot of different ways. I've got just the most very basic table saw sled here. It's literally just 2x4s and a piece of plywood. But anyway, for the splines, I just made this little jig that mounts in here, and you can see it just holds it at an angle. And the way I do this, I push this forward, and you can see the spline's already cut in it. Till it's lined up. And I just attach it with a couple of screws, of course, far away from the blade. And because I've got these pre-drilled, they go right in there. So you can see how this is going to work. Of course, this will only go so far, and it'll start raising up the sled. And that's a pretty good rule of thumb. You don't have to go crazy with the size of the slot. About halfway or a little less. And we'll raise that up and run these through. And you can see I've made several marks here. This is just kind of a cheat mark. I can mark this out to wherever I want these to land. Flip it over and just keep using that same mark, and they should come out pretty consistent. You can make these much larger if you want, just so that you're covering yourself. I've done enough of these to kind of know about what size I need. So I just cut them into kind of little triangle shapes. We'll go in here and put some glue in these slots we just made. And this can be done multiple ways as far as cutting these. You can do it with a router. You can do it by hand. Either way, get them in there and set the glue in. Of course, you want to wipe off the excess if you can. You can use that on your next one. So we're back on this again today. We're at the point now that we're almost ready to be putting this thing together. And by the end of the day, we're going to get it where we're ready to spray the water-based poly. The things I got to do today, cut these splines off, sand everything up, touch up any little gaps we've got, align this part to the bottom, set in our hinges where they're going to go. Of course, we're going to take this back apart so we can spray it. And then there's another little detail we're going to add to that. So anyway, let's jump in here and get these splines cut out of here. Easy to do. You can do this more than one way too. This is just a regular old cheap flush trim saw. So the old speed square here, I've got everything set to where it needs to be, just like I've done the other day before I cut it. We've got it set where you want to be. And I would recommend at this point getting you a good sharp pencil and making a very light mark where your corners are. That way when you put glue and that kind of stuff on here, you'll have a reference point. And it's so tiny that you're really not going to see it once you got it finished. But you can come back and clean that up too. Now what we'll do, basically turn this over. Okay, so we're going to glue this thing on, and we're not going to use a ton of glue. I finally got a fill up on my glue bottle. This part I definitely don't want it saturated. And from here, you want to kind of come down here. And I could flip this over and set it down that way, but I've got to nail it. And so in my opinion, it's easier to do it this way. Okay, so I got one pretty much in each corner, and then I'll come back with a screw, and I'll put those in the centers. It just kind of holds it in place. But you kind of get the idea of what we got going there. So now at this point, we're going to go ahead and put our hinges on here. And the way I like to do these, now as I said, these are just kind of cheap hinges. They're kind of thin, but they're strong enough for what we're doing here. So what I usually do, I take this little preset ruler, whatever you call this thing. And I've got this particular one set for 1 inch. I take the hinge, just line it up to that. And then I take a marking knife. Just hold it in place. Of course, you can put screws through this and mark it that way too, but I usually don't have much issue doing it this way. Now these will be coming back off of here, so if you do have small screws like that, it's in just a regular screw, you can use that at least to temporarily set this. I'm going to put these in here with my smallest screwdriver, of course. Get those started. Once we get it started, we'll set our lid on here and get it marked for these hinges. Okay, and what I like to do, once you get everything measured with this, instead of marking this, because it's not really going to help you much now, I like to hold it down and mark the edge of your hinge. And that way when we flip it over, we can judge it by that. So I've got the back edge of these hinges lined out. What I do is lay it on here to where you can kind of tell the back is touching the line. And we just mark out the rest of the hinge. So as you can see, we got these mortises cut for the hinges. Now they do look a bit deep, but that's going to account for this back part of the hinge being a little bit thick. Get that lined up and you'll feel it sink down on it. And once you get it up here, you can see that's pretty much hidden. So that's a nice tight fit. I'm happy with it. We got one other detail left. Now I can pre-drill the screws right now. It's not necessary. We can do that after the fact. I got one little detail we're adding to the front of this. Now here where you can customize it to your heart's content. Put people's names in it, whatever it might be. This particular customer has chosen this to be a Bible box, so there will be a cross on the front. Something he's going to store. It's pretty precious to him. We're going to go ahead and make that now out of walnut, kind of accent these little miter splines here. So cherry and walnut together is going to look great, especially once we get this thing in poly and finished up. Okay, so we made us a pretty simple little cross, basically just two pieces half lapped. I'm going to glue that, use a pin nail to get it into the top of this, glue it of course and let it set overnight. And then we can start spraying the clear and we're pretty much wrapped up with this thing. So guys, that's going to bring us to the end of this video. Now, I will say I am extremely happy with the way this one turned out. Not to say it's flawless. I did mess up a couple times. But the key is to make sure you hide your mistakes pretty good, and I think we've done that. But this cherry looks absolutely beautiful. I love this particular finish I use all the time, this water-based poly. Main reason being, if you look at this thing, especially under light, it don't really look like a film finish. It lets the natural grain come through. Everything looks good after it's done. And one of the best things about it is, if you mess up, come back and scuff it up, do whatever you got to do, and put you another light coat on there, and basically it blends in and you'll never know it. It's what I love about that finish. But anyway, getting to the project here. Now, this took me a few days of doing it, and as I said, I do have a full-time job, so we're doing this of the evenings a lot of times. I didn't have a weekend to do it, but now if you've got a day or two off, you can knock out a bunch of these and get them done in just a day or two. And like I said, probably quicker than that. I let mine set overnight to cure with the glue and the finishes, that kind of thing. You can probably do that a little quicker if you're in the shop all day. As I said, doing this of the evening, I'd glue it up, let it sit overnight, or spray a finish, let it sit overnight, that kind of thing. Either way, what do you think about this project? Do you like it? Even if you're not down with the cross stuff, you could leave that off. Make this just a regular keepsake box, and you'll have no problem selling these, I promise you. I have sold a ton of these. But either way, let me know what you think. Oh, let me show you the inside too. You can kind of tell there. Now, I will say one thing. I wish I could find some heavier duty hinges, but these do the job. My only fear is like somebody grabbing this thing and just yanking it. But it holds it good. And the screws are small enough so they're not poking through the top here. But it looks good. Even the splines, while they're not as dark as I would have liked them to be, they still stand out. But anyway, that brings us to the end of the video. I appreciate you watching. Let me know what you think about this. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.